and enjoy the wonderful fellowship, the koinonia. Our theme today, to love as God loves. Thinking of that theme, I was reminded of a family experience, actually a lot of years ago. Our family had just returned from 3 years in Scotland, and our daughter was 10 years old. It was our custom that when I would go jogging, she would go along and bicycle along, and we could talk and sort of catch up on the day. And on this particular day, I was asking her how she was doing because it was an adjustment to have been in Scottish schools and now to be back in American schools. And I just asked her how she was doing with all of that, but she turned the conversation around. She was really concerned about a young fellow who was in her class who was new and who was struggling. And he was struggling with friends, he was struggling with his academic work, and she was worried about him. And she felt like he really needed some encouragement. And I says, do you think he would like to have a pat on the back from God? She said, oh yeah, Dad. I said, and how would that come? She said, well, from prayer and the Bible. I said, well, maybe not. And so we kept going on for a few more minutes. And then I reached over and I patted her on the back. And I said, Carol Joy, where is God's hand? And she said, at the end of your arm. And it's true. We are the body of Christ. We are the flesh, called to do the works of Christ, called to be Christ's hands, feet, Christ's words of encouragement. And so we come together in worship, and this is our time to listen to the voice of Christ. And we listen through music, and we listen through the word, and then we listen through silence. Rumi has said that the language of God is silent. And the writer of the first gospel, the first epistle of John, says these beautiful words, no one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and God's love is made complete in us. And so let us enter a time of worship when we calm our spirits, when we center down, and we open our hearts to whatever God would say to us through the music, through the words, and particularly through the silence.
Child, he reconciled little switch up here, and a little bit of a campfire song. So if you know it, feel free to sing along. You don't need to stand or anything like that. But this is something that Lori and I, we haven't sung for quite a while. And it might be new to some of you, and it may be familiar to others. But I just loved how meditative it was, and kind of an invitation to prayer. Draw me close. Draw me close to you. Never let me go. I lay it all down again to hear you say that I'm your friend. You are my desire. No one else will do. There's nothing else can take your place. To feel the warmth of your embrace. Help me find the way. Bring me back to you. You're all I want. You're all I ever needed. You're all I want. Help me know you are near. Draw me close to you. You are my desire. Help me find the way. Bring me back to you.
Thanks for that. That was really beautiful. Good morning, everybody. In order to grow in love, friends must make choices about what kinds of patterns of love they want to grow into. The ancient monastics, of course, believed the whole world to be their neighbors. At the same time, they did not believe that they would be able to act in love towards those outside their own communities if they did not first begin to love one another. Now, this one is one of my favorite set of verses, so it's quite an honor to read it for all of you. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. And the final quote by Howard Thurman. Love has no awareness of merit or demerit. It has no scale. Love loves. This is its nature.
Friends, oops, sorry about that. Good morning. Thank you, music team, for those songs of love and devotion. Thank you, Cullen, for that reading, those readings. And this sermon was a bit fun for me because I got to dig through some memories of mine that I had not thought of for a very long, long time. So it's almost, the first half of this almost reads like an essay because it's me like sifting through old memories of a place that I literally haven't been to in probably, 33, 34 years. I've not been there. I'll tell you why I have not been there. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about where I grew up in Ohio, or at least a feature of where I grew up in Ohio. If you've ever lived in or are from the Midwest, you know that stories that surround old strip mining pits are told with a kind of grave seriousness and ominous concern, as if to say, be careful when you talk about the strip mining pit. It's dangerous. Or by simply mentioning these places, these are often settings for rural folklore. You know, so-and-so saw a specter there one time, or Farmer Smith lost a cousin there at one time. You know, it's the strip mining pit. Be careful. And they are dangerous places, that's not to say that. Strip mines were created by surface coal mining companies back in like the early 20th century, scouring greedily into the Earth's surface, leaving long, gaping, scarred canyons behind. That was back when, that was before there was kind of land restorative practices where they were required by law, where the land was put back after the minerals were extracted. That wasn't always the case. They would usually just scour the land and leave this gaping canyon there. That's the strip mine pit. And oftentimes, during the 20th century, mining companies would dig downward into the earth until they struck a water table. And when that water table was ruptured, the entire man-made canyon would fill up with water. And sometimes even the machinery that made the canyon was stuck in the water. So you would see this like crane in the water, or the boom of the crane in the water. So you can kind of gather that like, well, if anyone went swimming in that, you would have to be careful of the wreckage that was left over in this pool of water. And, you know, these machines that were in the water, they kind of stood as a silent witness to man's excess in greed and mishandling of creation. You would see these things. And soon after, what was left was really an ecological desolation. Yet over a period of decades, the water would fill these places and settle into a deep turquoise, blue-colored, clear pool of water where life returned, where fish thrived, and what had been damaged by greed and a quick turn of profit became slowly and quietly a place of azure-colored beauty and refuge. Strip mining pond. In my teenage years, my early teenage years, I remember going to these places with my brother-in-law, Jim. Jim knew where all the strip mine ponds were. And, well, he had the cool car. He had a restored Monte Carlo. We would get in the car and there would be some docking on the radio or something like that. It was just so cool to hang out with Jim. My brother-in-law, I still love him. My brother Matthew and our friends would sometimes come along to the strip pits to fish, and it really was good fishing. You would go there. But the secret was you had to walk, as you approached these things, it was almost like approaching a church. You had to quiet down, stop talking, Jim would say, Carefully you would approach these places, and if you spoke, it was only in a whisper, like a church. You couldn't be loud or trudge heavily. Even your footsteps had to kind of soften up. You'd start walking on your tiptoes. Because if you trudged too heavily, you would ruin your chances of fishing. The water was unusually clear and a deep blue-green, and fish were sensitive and acclimated to sounds that were not part of their natural environment. So if you moved too fast or made too much noise, you wasted your trip out there because the big fish would disappear into the depths. To receive anything from the place, you had to adjust yourself. You had to become quiet, attentive, and certainly carefully respectful of its immediate depth off the shoreline. There was no shoulder, so to speak, into the depth. It just was, you're on land, and then there's deep, deep water. It's just there. If you were to converse with local neighbors in these areas about how deep the water was, you would often hear triple-digit numbers. It's 100 feet deep. One old farmer that lived in the area, I remember talking to him, that he had maybe wandered around our group, and I remember talking to him, and I remember there was kind of a piece of weed, like a weed dangling from his mouth. He was that type of guy. And every time he spoke a word, the weed would dangle, in his mouth as he had it there. And he said that we asked him, how deep is this strip pit? And he said, well, he sounded it with a rope with a brake rotor tied to the end of it one winter when it had frozen over. And he claimed that he never found the bottom, that he lost the whole rope. It went all the way down. Now, I leave that up to you to decide whether this is truly bottomless or what, but that's kind of the folklore. So he probably just wanted to scare us. But this is part of what it's like growing up in rural Ohio or adventuring out there. But even in my youth, I remember that even if you caught nothing, which was usually the case for me, when we left, I felt kind of changed, like I had been somewhere special. I had been in a place where I experienced some solitude. I was left alone. Long periods of silence, you had to be quiet. And for me to be quiet at that age was different, special. It was a place of stillness and quiet, where you were more of a passing observer of its mysterious blue waters. That posture of adjustment, going to a place and adjusting in order to receive, friends, is close to a description of the ways of the Spirit, I believe. We believe that the healing love of God does not force itself upon us in our lives, but rather is an ever-open invitation for us to attend to our inner landscape, to be still, to listen, to unlearn things we have learned, and to relearn things that perhaps we once forgot or never knew in the first place. And to align ourselves with what is already lovingly present.
For me, the pond is a fantastic metaphor of how the love of God moves in our lives, where there oftentimes may be a hurt or an injury. It is there that the work of the Spirit touches our lives. The wound is where the Spirit begins a work of healing, where our lives, oftentimes, they can't go back to where they once were before the wound, but with the help and the filling of the Spirit, they can be transformed into a new place of life. The second story, that's my first story. The second story has to do with something that I heard just this week from a friend, and it's kind of stayed with me. And I asked my friend if I could share it because it touched me so. He said, "Oh yeah, of course." I wanted to share an example of what this type of attending love is like in real life as an interaction between two people. What does that metaphor look like then in real life? This story has captivated me that I heard earlier this week, and my friend who lives out of state, he works as a chaplain at a residence facility, and he shared a story about how last week at the end of his shift, and as he was eager to go home after a long day, he was called upon last minute. You know, you're ready to go home, you're ready to clock out, and oh yeah, hey, now that I see you, by the way, can you come over here? And at the last minute, he was asked to check on a resident who was acting kind of abnormally, as opposed to their usual cheerful, jovial self. During this time, the resident in need had become uncharacteristically agitated, combative, and nonverbal. Normally, this person is just very jovial, very talkative, and very just cheerful. Something had changed and turned in them. And my friend was asked to kind of deal with it, investigate it. The nursing staff couldn't find anything wrong. So they thought, well, maybe the chaplain can do something. After a brief assessment by my friend, he realized the resident wasn't responding well to him and his talking. He wasn't able to calm down. But because he knew the resident well, he decided he's going to stick with them. So he decided to take the resident out for a walk outside, speaking softly, words of encouragement and familiarity to them. And he decided to sing some of their favorite songs of faith, thinking that might help, sticking with them. And even at one point, with the resident started like howling, and so he decided, well, I'm going to howl with the person. So they were like, ow, howling together. They said this behavior continued for almost an hour until something changed after that near hour. The resident gradually emerged from this unusual episode and haltingly was able to say, "I can speak now." And they came out of it. By the time my friend left for home, the resident had returned to a more normal, recognizable state of being. And what was unusual about that episode was that the person knew that it happened to them. It's not like they didn't know it happened. They knew it happened. But here's just one example of how through loving intervention, time, touch, conversation, song, movement, even the irrational. But through embodying care, the resident regained themselves through time, through touch, through compassion. Love did not overpower. Love simply stayed with the person. My friends, the world is full of so-called strip pits, as I explained, places where there are wounds and where harm has been done, and it's often deep harm. That is true. Where the water table of the sacred has been disrupted and broken upon. In these places, the testimony we are given is that God's Spirit fills those places in stillness, quietly over time, restoring life where we least expect it. Author Philip Yancey stated the nature of God correctly, I believe, when he wrote, "God's Spirit, like water, flows to the lowest part of our lives." Therefore, this is a call for an approach to ministry, not only to ourselves, but to others. Our call is to not force healing, but to become the kind of people who move courageously yet gently into such spaces of hurt and harm, where we can listen deeply and trust that by aligning with the motions of God's compassionate love, patient, kind, long-suffering, attentive, and embodied, we help fill the spaces that are in need of grace and healing. I wonder if, as we consider these kind of two stories, if we can settle into that same love now in this space and allow it to do its quiet work within us. A couple of queries before we go into a time of open worship. If the love of God is present everywhere in our lives, especially in our pain, when and where are we pausing to sit with this love, not as just an idea, but as an experience to be felt within our lives? When and where are we allowing this work to happen? Secondly, second query, the love of God that has been revealed through Christ makes bold and often surprising statements and teachings. You hear them in the New Testament. Love your enemies, this love says. Do good to those who persecute you, this love says. Aim to be the least around those you're around, this love says. How could adopting this humble approach impact your daily choices? Consider your relationships, your work, your craft, your hobbies. What would your life be like if you gave yourself entirely over to this radical love of God in Christ? Let's go ahead and take some time to settle in, sink down into that love of God. If there's something you are moved of spirit to speak, we have a microphone. Peggy, and friends online, if you are so moved to speak during this time, make sure you're unmuted so we can hear. Let's center down, dear friends.